Hey everybody, this is Rex Bear with Leak Project. It's July 16th, 2016. I hope you're having an amazing day wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Now this is part 2 of the Nancy Leider presentation. Nancy's from ZetaTalk.com. There are thousands of archives on that website predicting different outcomes and scenarios. Now Nancy's been talking about Planet X for over 10 years. And with the amount of information that's been presented during this podcast, I would say this is definitely one of the more compelling presentations that I've been involved in to learn data from other sources about Nibiru. One of the really interesting things about this interview, guys, is we were actually disconnected on the internet. Then we were disconnected on a landline twice. Several times when Nancy would bring up specific points of reference, the call would either drop or the sound wouldn't be there. Is it Skype gremlins? Is it just the phone system? Was it a solar flare? I don't know. But it was very interesting because I actually, after we got disconnected the first time doing the video presentation, I wasn't able to log back onto my internet hotspot. I had to actually use a different hotspot, a completely different Wi-Fi setup to get back on to the interview, and we had to finish it with her on a landline. If you go to leakproject.com and become a contributing member, you'll have access to all of our podcasts ad-free. A lot of people like to listen to shows when they're on a road trip or at work, and sometimes they don't have Wi-Fi access. So if you'd like to download all the shows, you can actually just listen to them on your phone, on your computer, at work, in the car. So you can do a daily opportunity. Actually, what it is it's set up to where it's downloadable per podcast, or you can do a weekly podcast download where you can download as many podcasts as you want for a week, and then we have a monthly option as well. So it's pretty cool. Check it out, leakproject.com. If you don't mind the commercials, just go to youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord. If you subscribe with YouTube, you'll have access to the latest podcasts absolutely free. There is going to be an exclusive section, though, on leakproject.com that is only available for members. Enjoy the presentation. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget, be the change you want to see.
You?
It is, and I actually had to hook up my hotspot from my cell phone because I can't get my computer to hook back up to my router now.
Are we recording?
Yeah. So
all right, we're good.
Yeah, we're good to go. I don't know what's going on, but somebody either didn't want us to talk or the Skype gremlins got us. One of the two.
You know, there's a lot of electromagnetic pulse these days, and that's caused by Planet X. These planes going down. If you were recording, I'll rattle in. But the whole thing about MH370, that was, you know, the whole plane became a ghost plane because the electronics were fried. German wings flying into the Alps, that MS-804 Egyptian plane going down into the Mediterranean. There's EMP like crazy. And over the U.S., we have a lot of that. You can see the graphs on the small planes right over the whole New Madrid region and up the East Coast. Yeah, just frantic. The first week of June, there were so many planes you couldn't even see the landmass under the chart. So, and it causes static on the radio stations. It causes electronics to falter. It makes people a little nauseous and dizzy. But you know, here we are in the middle of the mid-morning, and that's when Nibiru is right above us. It's a little bit. It precedes the sun a little bit along the ecliptic, and so it's casting its nasty electromagnetic pulse at us.
Well, I'll tell you that, and now it wouldn't even let me hook my laptop back up to my router, which was kind of weird. So that made me wonder if there might be something even more to that, because this is some pretty sensitive data. But hey, who knows? Maybe I'm just looking into it too much. But you know, you gave us about 20 minutes of invaluable information, Nancy. And when I went back to look at that recording, it was just so staticky from whatever reason. I don't know. So could we go back? Could we jump back to where we first started talking about you and how you had your first experiences with the Zetas, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. And I knew the Zetas from prior lives because reincarnation does exist. And I've been told by the Zetas I have like about 1,200 lifetimes. So they knew me. They knew my soul. And I said during this time, which is the time of the next passage of Nibiru, when we would have a lot of cataclysmic changes on Earth, a lot of spiritual growth, a lot of change, that I wanted to be a communicator. And they, knowing me, agreed to back me in that. And it turned out to be much more successful than they expected. So ZetaTalk is considered a success. I was about 7 or 8 years old, running around. I was tomboy, my little coveralls, barefoot, down in my swamp below my grandmother's house catching frogs, and out they popped from behind trees. You know, when you, as a child, if you see wildlife or something, you go off of the vibes that you're getting.
Right.
Out my joints. They looked at my forehead, and later on I realized what they were doing, because my son also had an implant put in where his third eye is, in the chakra. As far as I know, he and I are the only two contactees that have ever had an implant put there, and it was for communications with the Zetas. So then off I went. But when I did recall of that later, when I was 55 years of age and I became aware of my contactee status, and I was meditating and just telling the story, I remembered in that first visit that they did something behind my elbow on my right arm. And I walked up to a mirror, backed up, and took a look, and there's a nip there like a mouse bit me. So they took a soil sample from that spot. And it goes to show that this is not your imagination. When you feel the pain on recall, and it's something that you weren't even aware of, that you now suddenly discover, some weird who looks behind their elbow? What parent looks behind the child's elbow? You know, and I didn't even know I had that little scar there. So that's how I got introduced to the Zetas in this lifetime.
Now, what are they from the Zeta Reticuli area? Is that why you call them Zetas?
Actually, this is from Benny and Barney Hill. Oh, you know that famous episode.
Oh yeah.
And she drew a map, and there was some woman in Minnesota who said, "Oh, that's a star chart of Zeta Reticuli, all the stars," and that's how they got to be called the Zetas. They don't have a name for themselves because they are so highly telepathic. They don't require names. I'm not sure how that quite works, but the bottom line is they don't run around with names and numbers. We do. In order to be able to find individuals, I have to know what your name is, what your telephone number is. In their case, they just sort of put their finger to their head and said, "Rex, let's you and I talk," and boom, there we are. You know, well, they don't say Rex. I mean, I don't know how they work that, but they don't use names. It's not their name for themselves. And they said that their stars are not the bright stars we're aware of. They're dim stars. The reason their eyes are so huge is because, like our night-seeing creatures, they need big eyes to pull in all the light. So they were on planets around dim stars, and just like man, early man was genetically engineered from the ape. They were transplants on those planets, and they have what they called early Zeta. They had me draw an image of what they were giving me, kind of a lobby head in the back and squat. Looked a little bit like E.T. actually. And they said that they had a diet of moss and bugs on their dimly lit planets. So they didn't have large predators. And they're not really meat eaters. They're really vegetarians. They eat bugs. And they do look, I'm not sure about anybody else's photos, but when they came out, or when MJ12 released the Skinny Bob video, 17 seconds of an old tape that had been taken during Roswell days, and they showed this adorable Zeta, you know, with a wrinkly forehead and winking his eyes and adjusting his little shirt. Boy, that's what they look like. And I went back and compared the images that I had drawn of what the Zetas look like. Their hands, they have long fingers. When you shake hands with them, their fingers end up landing in the middle of your forearm. They have very high cheekbones. A little nose is so tiny that I equate it to like your little finger, vertical up and down. It doesn't stick out at all. Mouth that's just nothing more than a little line, a slit. You know, and they do have ears, but they don't stick out. So Skinny Bob is absolutely a small Zeta, and it matches the drawings that I had drawn since ZetaTalk began in 1995.
They also look like Lamb, which was drawn by Aleister Crowley back in the early 1900s, or maybe mid-1900s actually, where he made contact with this entity called Lamb, and it had very similar eyes, very similar shaped head. So that's interesting. I often wonder if where they come from, like the way that they get in and out of dimensions so fast, some of these ETs, are they going into the same space that maybe spirits are too?
Well, this is the way the Zetas have described it, and they say they can't give us a better description of that because they don't know either. There's like an evolution of spirituality. We're on the lower level, kindergarten, and they're the next level up, and it goes up and up, So until finally you don't need incarnations anymore, and you just live in light form. So in any case, they said. There's a density shifting that goes on, and when you're very young, the physicality is heavier than the spiritual stuff, and they call it the stuff of souls, which transcends all these densities. In other words, you can be speaking to someone who's in the fourth dimension or fifth, sixth. Your souls can have a conversation because they're in touch with each other, but the physicality is different. What does that mean? That means that our atoms and our physicality, the atoms and subatomic particles and all that, vibrate at a certain rate. And if you go to the next dimension, the vibration increases. It's faster. So therefore, something in the third dimension or the fourth dimension can occupy the same physical location, and these atoms will not interact. This is why you can see a spaceship and it disappears. Where'd it go? This is why over the Devil's Triangle we have like Flight 19, and those airplanes just disappeared. They went into the fourth dimension. Now, the Zetas describe that as a density. Density and dimension are the same thing. It's a vibrational frequency. So yes, the stuff of souls transcends the physical nature, and all souls on all different levels can speak to each other.
That's fascinating. And if we could go back also, you were giving us some great information on Planet X and Nibiru, kind of the origins all the way back in '83 when it was first discovered by some scientists. Could you share that story with us again?
Yeah, basically, the ancient astronomers have always known that there was some kind of a gravity tug out in the direction of Orion that caused perturbations in the outer planets. And the ancient Sumerians knew about Nibiru that came in from that direction and made a passage every 3,600 years. Well, actually, the geological signature on Earth is unmistakable. There's things that happen every 3,600 years. So you go back, and it's the Jewish Exodus, when that big volcano in the Mediterranean island of Santorini blew, and it was huge. And we have the story of, the Red Sea parting, Moses, and all the red dust, turning the lake blood red, and the plagues, the insects and frogs jumping around, and well, that was 3,600 years ago. And there's all kinds of geological records of that. Extinction caves. They found one down off of South Africa recently, where the waves have just smashed creatures into this cave, with such violence, and they just all drowned and got broken up. They have that in the Mediterranean. They have that in Florida. Then we go to the mammoths up there on Wrangel Island that died out approximately 3,800 years ago. Well, they're not exact. That's close enough to 3,600. Green grass and buttercups in their tummies found in the polar circle where the grass doesn't grow, north of Finland, and blah, blah, blah. Well, the crust shifts, which Hapgood wrote up in his book. Hapgood was a peer of Einstein. And Einstein said that was the best explanation he had for why we have wandering poles and ice ages, etc., because the crust slips. When this planet comes by, it's a huge magnet. It shoves us in the sky, and the crust and core of the Earth separate from the violence. The core realigns to align with the sun, and the crust stays where it got shoved, which is a new place, which is why we have signs of tropical growth down there in Antarctica and ice ages. It's not. The last ice age was where it was supposed to be cold over France. At the same time, supposedly, we had green grass and buttercups in Siberia, because that's where the mammoths were ranging. Well, what did the sun do? Wink out over France and then wink on again over Siberia? They're at the same latitude now. Obviously, the crust has shifted. So, Nibiru. The aliens told modern man about that during Roswell and said it's coming in approximately 2003 from the direction of Orion, et cetera, et cetera. NASA sent up a balloon, the infrared balloon, IRAS, to look for this up above the atmosphere. And it was the search for, in those days it was called the search for Nemesis. From 1980 on, you could go and research that and find it in various magazines. And I went to the library and got these magazines off microfiche, and prints of that. And sure enough, they're looking for what was tugging out there in that direction, the search for Nemesis. And Nemesis was given the whole thing about Nibiru and Planet X is there's so many different names. You have to say the same object. They were looking for something out there tugging away. So in 1983, they found it, and they were so discombobulated, it hit the press, front page article, Washington Post at the toward the bottom, and you can still get that on microfiche, and it's all over the internet too, saying, "Oh, we found something where we're not sure if it's close in or far away. It might be close in and kind of cool, or far away and very warm, or but we know it's not inbound." Well, if they don't know what it is, how can they say it's not inbound? And after that, a cover-up dropped, and nobody can talk about that because Ronald Reagan was president at that time in 1983, wrote executive orders saying nobody should talk about this object we found out there, and nobody should talk about aliens either. So, consequently, everybody claimed that there was nothing that was found, and nor was there even any reason to go looking. All those perturbations of the outer planets that the ancient astronomers had computed with their math, it was just a math error. So that's the history of the search for Planet X, but it's gotten a lot more interesting.
Well, and Nancy, didn't you say after that there were some people that basically went rogue and wanted to find out for themselves? They got some equipment and went to certain areas?
Yeah, actually, there's always been an effort to inform the people that there was this inbound. Nibiru was real, and it was inbound because the people deserve to know, and hundreds of people have been assassinated because they couldn't keep their mouth shut. One famous one was Harrington, and he worked for the Naval Institute, and he was involved in this search in 1983, and he took a telescope to New Zealand and said, I'm going to look for it, I'm going to track it, I'm going to tell the people about it, and pretty soon he was dead of whatever, I don't know, was it a heart attack? In any case, assassination. And so people know, the astronomers knew they were supposed to keep their mouths shut, even though they wanted. So I actually was told a story by an astronomer who said that his friend, they went out drinking beer after, and they were both astronomers working at an observatory, said, it just has to be told, we have to tell people. He said his friend didn't even make it home from the bar. I mean, that's how efficient they are. They were making sure that everybody kept their mouth shut. So anyway, it's been a big cover-up. And why, you ask? Because the powers that be, the establishment, the wealthy people, politically powerful, whatever, they think if the common man knows what's going to be happening and relates it to things like the time of the Jewish Exodus or the time of the flood and big cataclysmic changes, they're going to want to quit their jobs, stop paying their mortgage, take their money out of the bank and buy seeds and gardening equipment instead, or run screaming in the streets, go crazy, kill off their family, whatever the horror story is. Now they know, these people, they know, and they're handling the information, but they feel that the common man couldn't handle the information, so they have to keep you dumb. And that's been going on until very recently.
You were also talking to us about the planet itself and its makeup when you brought up how it's kind of a water world, and I'm wondering if it gets so close to the sun, how it doesn't all evaporate, essentially.
Yeah, this is back when it was first discovered. Harrington said, I believe he said it's 4 times or 5 times the diameter of the Earth, and et cetera. And the Zetas have said, I can't remember who said 4 or 5, but it's 4 to 5 times the diameter, and the Zetas say 23 times as massive. So that on the surface it has a gravity pull about 1.5 times Earth's, which is why the Anunnaki who live on Nibiru, they are about 8 foot tall, as versus mankind, who is 5 to 6 feet tall. You need that extra bone strength for that gravity draw.
Can I jump in real quick? I just wanted
Sure.
to ask about the Anunnaki, because I had Gerald Clark on yesterday, and he breaks down a lot of the deities and god names from other cultures and times, and he can connect them to certain Anunnaki like Enlil, Enki, Anu, etc. Have the Zetas correlated any of that, or do you know much about those particular names and bloodlines also?
I actually met an Anunnaki, but I have not gone into all of that because this is, according to who is what you have to ask. You know, like Sitchin has said, because who translated the ancient Sumerians has said, they did genetic engineering. They created man. They engineered man from animals like apes. And the Zeta said, that's not true. They're just bragging. It's like bravado bragging, you know, and they were never the genetic engineers of man. Man is genetically engineered from the apes. There's been a lot of different hands in on that, but the Anunnaki are not. They are our peers, not our superiors. They are not at the same level as all these other aliens that come zipping in and out on spaceships. For instance, the Anunnaki cannot do dimension shifting, you know, which the alien visitors can. You see their spaceship and then boop, it's gone. You know, they move into the next dimension. They're just like another race of man, you know, and not that much more intelligent, if at all, than mankind. So ahead of us in the technological development, because way back when they had rocket ships, you know, and lasers and things like that, and terrified mankind and used early man as a slave base to mine for gold, which was why the Council of Worlds, which is an administrative force in our part of the universe, and yes, there are rules, and yes, there is oversight and a police force, etc., they said, all right, the Anunnaki has to be quarantined from mankind because they're too much of a negative influence, and this is mankind's spiritual schoolhouse, so they had to get out of here. And they chased them off the earth by bad weather and things like, you know, lost. They kept losing their gold shipments. So they went off elsewhere. They went to the Mars, back to Mars, to the moon of Mars, Phobos, and mined there. I do not know all the mythology about the Anunnaki, the names of their elders or their gods or anything like that. I know certain things, but to me, my focus has been on Nibiru incoming, the spiritual changes here on Earth, the cataclysmic changes that are going to occur, the big cover-up, that type of thing. It's not. You have to specialize a little bit, and the Anunnaki are not my specialty.
Oh, hey, absolutely, and I appreciate you giving us the specialties that you do have. This is fantastic. So let's talk about Nibiru, and if you could describe also kind of how do you feel that gold was used for their atmosphere to protect the planet, or is that kind of a according to the Zetas, National Enquirer stuff too?
No, they actually confirmed that, and the reason that they were so, we value gold, and mankind says, oh, it's gold. You got to have gold coin because the Anunnaki did, but it was a very practical matter with them. Their planet is not exactly a planet, not exactly a sun, and the Zetas described it as a smoldering brown dwarf, which I came under a lot of ridicule for that. But mankind does not have a term for what Nibiru is. It's heavier than a planet, but it's not burning with the same kind of fire that a sun has. However, it's more of a water planet than a ground planet. It does have land masses, but its oceans are larger than ours, and deep rifts in the oceans, and light comes up from those deep rifts from this chemical action that's going on in its core, which emits light as well as heat, and then the light goes up and hits the cloud structure above, and it bounces back, and they want to retain that. They want to retain the heat and the light, and they find that if they use gold dust in some way in their clouds, that all that bounces back to their planet surface, and then therefore they have a median temperature. Now, the trip that Nibiru takes is way out in space and then coming back every 3,600 years, but so it's gone from our sun a long time, and it doesn't need our sun for warmth and light. It generates its own. So what kind of a orbit is that? And a lot of times you'll see diagrams that show it as a big oval. Well, that's not it. The Zeta said it's like a train track, goes out and comes back, and the out and back are so close to each other that it's practically like a train track side by side. Our sun has a binary, but it's an unlit binary. It's dark, and it's 18.74 Sun-Pluto distances out in the direction of Orion. And they said that, Zeta said that at the start of ZetaTalk in 1995, 20 years ago. And Nibiru is a planet that orbits both, but it doesn't go round and around. It slings. It's a sling orbit. It slings past one, turns around, slings to the middle, and slings past the other, turns around, slings to the middle, slings like that. And you'll find this interesting, that when they came out in January talking about Planet 9, which incidentally was out there in the direction of Orion, and they said at the bottom part of Orion's bow, which is where the Zetas said that the IRAS team went to look in 1983 and found Nibiru coming in.
That's incredible. Now, does there need to be like a special telescope or lens to actually see Nibiru?
Well, guess where they said about planets? That's pretty darn close to 18.74. That's
we lost you. That last part you said went out, Nancy. What did you say?
Oh yeah, let me describe all of that. When it was way out there, the infrared team in 1983, IRAS, they went out and looked in infrared and found it. But where the Zetas described a path of where to look. They said, okay, here's where in 1983 they found it, and then it moved this way, it swung up towards the ecliptic, and then it got into retrograde.
You still think that's just the Nibiru?
I just don't know. I don't know.
Wow.
It could be sabotage, but I think we're also getting an assist if that's the case. So
yeah,
I tell you, we'll just keep plugging.
Every time you get into something really good, it blanks out for like a second or 2 seconds. There'll be nothing, no sound, and then all of a sudden it'll start again.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, so do you remember where we were at?
we were at talking about 3 different continents in 2001, 2, and 3, as I recall, right?
Yep.
Are you still there with me?
Yeah, I'm here. You were correct.
Okay. I'll go back. We had a teams, and I had in France, in the U.S., and several places, and down in South Africa and Zaire. So the first thing we did in the winter of 2001 to 2, or was that 2000 to 2000? Anyway, it was the winter of 2001, and because Orion is only visible in the winter months, and they went to observatories in France and in the U.S., in 2 different places, Vancouver and near Flagstaff, and they looked where the Zeta said to look, and there it was. They found a dim star. I think we had a woman also in South Africa, who was blocked, but she found more than one observatory to go to and did find it also. So then in 2002, they switched to infrared viewing, and we had a student in France who was allowed to get his hands on the equipment. His instructors didn't know what he was doing, and took a picture infrared, and also a skeptic in Florida who took an image and said, I think he was an astronomer, and he was saying, all right, here's the image, where is it? And the Zetas had me put my finger on it, basically, and sure enough, there was a star there. There was a dim star that should not be there, not on the star charts. Well, actually, in 2001, we had an astronomer take an image of it, too, from France, but he was not allowed to release that image to us because the cover-up was ongoing. So then by the time we got to the fall of 2002, going into the winter of 2003, we were looking at CCD images. They rented a scope in Arizona and
did it again. Just told.
Do it in pieces. I'll pick up where I left off. I think I was talking about
Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona. And CCD images, and every 2 weeks they went and took these and paid for it with their own money, this team did. And it was a moving object. It would move to the new spot where the Zeta said it should be. They'd look at the old spot, it was gone. It was a dim star, not on the star charts. By the spring of 2003, it was coming inbound, and people were looking for it. They were to look to the right of Orion, not Aldebaran, which is that reddish star. I myself saw it on March 26th. I was coming home from a business meeting, went out in a cornfield, and there it was, kind of, dim mess. I couldn't call it an object. It was a reddish grouping. And people were taking photos of this with a 10x binocular cameras or whatever, amateurs, and some terrific shots. And it showed a double helix, kind of a swirl behind it. Why is that? Nibiru has lots of moons. They don't go round and around it. They trail behind it and into what the Zetas call moon swirls, which get into kind of a dance with each other, avoidance, attraction, dance. And the two main moons are on either side, so they look like shoulder pads, like you have a football player running at you. And that's what you can see in these photos. And you can see that in the photos we're taking today because it's become so visible lately that even webcams are capturing it regularly. So in it came and crossed the Earth's orbit and got closer to the sun, so it was lost in the sun's glare. But there are several visibility persona, I want to call it, where people have seen it and seen the complex, but they're not even sure what they're seeing. One is what we call the second sunrise, and this is where at dawn or dusk they will see a sunrise, and then they'll see another sunrise and say, wait a minute, I saw two suns rise. The first one that rose fades, and the other one, slightly to the left, is the real sun. And likewise with sunset. You'll have the sun will go down, and there'll be a second sun to the right, and it'll go down, two suns. So this is because the sunlight is just at the right angle. It's bouncing off of the vast dust cloud that shrouds Nibiru and allows it to appear. It's reflected sunlight. So what we're seeing lately, because people have been taking photos, if you use the right filters, Mylar or an insert from a floppy disk, you could see this complex. You could see Nibiru and the moons and the vast tail. Why Mylar and the floppy disk insert? Because they screen out light that's in any spectrum but the red light spectrum, because this is shrouded by iron oxide dust, reddish, and therefore if you pick out only the red light from the sky around the sun, then you see it.
Funny, I actually saw somebody sent in some footage to us, Nancy, at Leak Project that showed they did that thing with the floppy disk, pulled out that film, and then did some footage, and you could see what you're talking about. It's probably going to depend on the time of day, and I wonder how fast this thing actually moves. And have you figured out how many moons there are behind it dancing around?
Yeah, the Zetas said a couple of dozen, and I don't think that's an exact count, because where does it become debris and when is it a moon? They said a couple of dozen the size of our moon, as it's just a rough estimate. But it has a huge amount of debris. It used to go through the asteroid belt, which is where the red dust came from. And as the sun loses stuff, the sun is burning and shrinking. And as it does that, it becomes less and less of a gravity draw, and therefore Nibiru can pass closer and closer to the sun because the gravity force, the gravity repulsion force doesn't push it away. So in the past, it went through the asteroid belt, and we had a couple of dozen small planets, mostly water planets, that got pelted to pieces as Nibiru went through there with its moons. It was sort of like a herd of, the running of the bulls comes to mind. It's kind of like, here they come, get out of the way. There's no way there's not going to be collisions. So, and as these planets smashed to pieces, there was a lot of red dust. They had lava and the like. That's where the asteroids come from. And guess what our comets are, which are mostly dirty snowballs? It's the water from those water planets, that is slinging around still. So Nibiru is a magnet, big magnet, collected all that dust and trash, and it trails behind it because it's magnetically attracted and gravitationally attracted to Nibiru, which is, as I said, 23 times as massive as the Earth. It's a heavy magnet.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that at one point in time it actually did hit the Earth, or has it? Because some people think that the moon might have been caused from Nibiru hitting the Earth, and then that broke off. And then I've heard that the moon's actually older than the Earth from many samples that have been taken from the moon, supposedly. But there's so much disinformation, and the left will say one thing, the right will say the other. So what do you know, and what have the Zetas told you?
Um, yeah, the moon was not our natural moon to begin with. It was the ancient Sumerians actually talk about Tiananmen or something they call it, and it was our Earth was not where it is today. It was further out in space, and it got bashed by an object, not our moon, but another object which wounded the Earth where our Pacific Ocean is right now. And this whole process of Pangea, breaking apart the land masses and migrating, is an attempt by, after various pole shifts or passages of Nibiru where it gets jerked around, for the land and water to equalize. So as you can see, if you look at the Pacific, there's hardly any land masses. You turn the Earth around and look at from the opposite side, there's all the land. And Pangea was one big mess, which or mass and broke up. That's where it came from. Now that didn't happen because of the moon, but the moon is a chunk that arrived and got attracted to the Earth at some point, and is not our natural. We weren't born at the same time, so to speak. Yes, that is the history. The ancient Sumerians described that history. Where did they get that info from? They got it from the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are an older race of essentially man, and therefore they were more technologically advanced. They had rockets and space travel before we did, but they are not at a level of the aliens that zip around in spaceships. So they cannot do dimension shifting. They're not at that level. They are peers. They are our peers.
Well, and I'm wondering what a life has got to be like on Nibiru with this crazy orbit that goes so far away from the sun yet so close and such a long span. It's got to have a big impact on the people living there and their DNA, their mental astuteness, just everything. I'm thinking, what is it like for them?
Yeah, the Zetas were asked questions about that and addressed that. They said, because everyone imagines that it's searingly hot as they pass the sun, which they are doing, and they're really on the outbound part of the passage now. Do they get really hot, and they're out in space? Is it really cold? Well, as I said, they have their own heat and light source, and so because they are a water-based planet, there's a lot of water that can absorb heat, when they pass the sun, and then they have a 3,600-year voyage before they return again. So some of that heat, of course, dissipates to some degree, but it's not like it's freezing cold or frying hot. But I was actually taken there in a spaceship to see, and I don't remember being curious, but I guess they wanted me to be aware. And I thought I would see red dust in their sky because, of course, when you look at it and you filter for the red light spectrum, it's red dust. But I was surprised that when you're under their clouds and between their water and the clouds, their clouds are cream-colored, and it's very dense cream-colored clouds, so they don't see a blue sky at all, and they don't see red dust either. So pretty boring. And if they want to see what's out there, they have to take a rocket ship or something and go up, like we do in the ISS space station, and to look around. So basically, they don't freeze or fry, and the whole passage through the solar system. It's like, is anything happening? To them, it doesn't shake their world.
Now, do they have influence within our government, the Anunnaki and the Zetas? I mean, are they all working with different parts and factions?
The Anunnaki don't influence our government or even mankind at all. They were chased from the Earth in the past. They were so technologically advanced and being larger because of this greater gravity on their planet, 8 foot tall versus 5 foot tall, humans, and with a musculature and bone density to go with that. Very attractive, strapping males. I met one. Wow, I'm 5'4", and I stood next to him, and the top of my head came to the middle of his chest. And
where was that at?
Really, it was a lineup of hominoids that I was being introduced to because of my communication role, and I would be talking to a lot of people like you, curious about a lot of things, to know what different life forms looked like. And they were just in a lineup of hominoids, just one of over a dozen different types, and they really get weird.
Can you walk us through?
Anunnaki are not weird.
Can you walk us through this experience real quick? I mean, was it on a spaceship? Was it in a underground laboratory?
It wasn't. It was most on a spaceship because these were all creatures from elsewhere that agreed to come to Earth and be introduced. And likewise, I'm sure that there's some humans that get taken to other worlds to be introduced in the lineup to other aliens. So the hominoids, I think I wrote that up in my website somewhere in the worlds section. Some of them are covered with scales, like a turtle shell would be, for protection, and the really tall, skinny guy that shows up in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and it looks like almost like a broomstick thinness. He was there, with a bulb-sized head. He was kind of in charge, So there's such a variety, and it wasn't even the hominoids that is most interesting. Then I started getting introduced to an intelligent insect and a beanbag man, which made me faint, and because he just really looked like a beanbag with a fringe of little claws around his middle, two big eyes in the middle. But the oddest creature was one that was explaining the plate movements that our globe is in the process of enduring, as it adjusts to the wobble that Nibiru is causing on Earth. And she was a real sweetheart, but her physique was so odd that they knew that, and she was going to give a holographic presentation to a room of about maybe 200 contactees, and they knew that her appearance would be a distraction, so they had me walk out on stage with her, holding her paw. Her legs looked like a dog's legs. The knee bent backwards, and then she had a fringe of tentacles around her middle, as though if she walked in water waist high, she could feed off the surface material. And then her head was so small, but her eyes were huge, like grapefruit, big yellow grapefruit eyes. And so she was like a chimera, a combination of various different insect, tentacles, dog legs. And I think her hands were hands, except it looked more like a paw to me. So I went out there holding her paw and introduced her, and then she gave us her holographic presentation, and she was good at that. And she was not drawing something in the room that people looked at. She was doing a mind-to-mind presentation to these people. And they were comfortable with listening to it because I was out there holding her paw. So they do get weird. So as your question was, are they in the government? Now, there's like 1,000 different life forms, and this is just a kind of an estimate thrown out there so you have a way to gauge. It gets so weird, the life forms do. A lot of water creatures. I met one that was a big amoeba, and it communicated with me by swarming around my ankles, and all of a sudden I knew what it was trying to say. So there's a spiritual transformation going on. Our Earth is a spiritual schoolhouse, good and evil, and is emphasized in our media a lot, in our movies, because that is what's going on here. Our first lesson has to be, do you care about other people? Will you cooperate, and are you a team player with helping other people, and being willing to sacrifice your welfare to help the general good and all that? Or are you one of these selfish bastards, greedy, sadistic, control freak? And on developing worlds, about 95% go the good route, good-hearted, practice the golden rule, and 5% become very selfish. So the first thing that happens in forming souls, new souls, is that they have to make that determination. It's not an intellectual determination. It's one that requires, on average, 1,000 lifetimes or more, and you have to take action on your decision, and then it sorts out. Now, if you're one of these bad guys, Dick Cheney or Genghis Khan or Adolf Hitler or whomever, off you go to a prison planet, and you live among those of your own kind until you figure out that you've done the wrong thing and decide to go in a different direction. And then the others, who are truly good-hearted and caring about, they get to expand and have more technological abilities, zip around the universe, etc., and go into a higher dimension.
I've heard a lot of people say that this could be a prison planet. Is it?
No, we are actually, now the reason it seems that way is because how come people are just bashing at each other and nobody seems to stop them? Well, there are rules, but the rule is it's a self-study world. You don't, if there very little spiritual development goes on, if everybody is born beautiful, if you're constantly protected, you never have any pain, somebody watches out for you and rescues you, etc. It's like beautiful jet set babies don't grow up. They stay immature. So what you have is all kinds of problems. And if you yourself are experiencing problems, the next time you're going to an incarnation and you see somebody else having problems, you say, oh, I remember when that happened to me. It was terrible. And you have empathy and you reach out and you take action, okay, to help, see? So your tribulations become a memory to help you be empathetic in future, etc. And so what you have, and spirit guides will put you into different incarnations. We switch. Sometimes we're male, sometimes we're female. We may be beautiful and successful and wealthy in one, and really, a crippled leper in another. So all of these things are learning experiences, opportunities, as the Zetas say. And in the end of all of that, you have your soul has grown, and you may grow in the right direction, you may grow in the wrong, like Star Wars with good and evil, the Force, the dark side, the light side, and it's very real. So.
Somebody told me I joined the dark side the other day in the comments section because I said that a picture was a lens flare.
Oh, I'm sure
I have not joined the dark side. It was a lens flare. Come on, guys, lighten up. No, sorry, Nancy. I just had to throw that out there.
There are a lot of lens flares. A lot.
Yeah.
There are. And you can, most pictures, people send me pictures and I say, oh no, this all lens flare. We have poleshiftning.com is a site that I link to a lot on my website, and people post their photos, and people have done, it's basically a study in what you should do. If you want to determine if something is a lens flare, the best thing to use is a video, because as you move the video, the lens flare moves all over the place. And if it's not a lens flare, it stays in its spot, vis-a-vis the sun. So
right.
That's the easiest way to rid your image of lens flares, or to determine.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a question from one of our listeners about the coordinates that you originally had. If you could tell us that again, and then the coordinates that you would see it at now. Where is it best place if someone wanted to try and find it?
Yeah, when it was inbound, we were using right angle and declination, what is known as Ra and Dec, as a guide, and it was being found. But once it came in and it was making a passage of the sun, this is a part of ZetaTalk that a lot of people find hard to stomach, and that is that they said that the Earth's orbit actually got halted. December of 2003, when it came in the spring and summer of 2003, the Earth was on the opposite side of Orion. Orion was, because you see that when you look out in the night sky in the winter. So as we trucked along in our orbit, and it got to be December of 2003, Nibiru was essentially sitting in our orbit. And we said, whoa, big, gravity bully, and we can't pass. It won't let us pass. And it has pushed us back as it's moved through the solar system, very close to our orbit in a straight line. Now, I think I sent you a graphic of that, Rex. Then it's pushed the Earth back, and so we are now in the August position, and we'll be there for the pole shift or the crystal shift. So people say, yeah, but what about the seasons? We're having winter and summer, and that doesn't figure. Well, the constellations are all wrong. The constellations are all wrong if you really take note. But benign aliens are tipping the globe, tipping the Earth, to simulate winter and summer, and have done so over many, many passages of Nibiru, because our Earth is a schoolhouse. It's a valuable schoolhouse. They don't want all life on Earth to freeze or fry. They don't want to set mankind back, into the caveman days every time, for instance. And so, therefore, our schoolhouse is being protected. But as far as bashing each other, which we do, the rule is hands off. Let the babies learn their spiritual lessons on their own, because it's most effective that way. Put the little ones in the playpen and let them beat each other over the head, or because reincarnation exists, and they'll just reincarnate into another baby. And that's the learning experience that we're going through. So we're allowed to do that, But the Council of Worlds will not let our globe, the Earth, be extinguished by some sort of a big collision, and it won't let it freeze or fry. So there you are. Happy schoolhouse.
You know, that happy schoolhouse idea sounds a lot better than getting hit by a planet that's got 20-something times the mass of our own, or more than that. Now, what did you say, though, it was that was protecting us, essentially, from...
Ocean force. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. Gravity, man does not really understand gravity. You know, they struggle, you know, with all our little math theorems and the like. But the issue is why, and actually I tried to prove this to the astronomers on SciAstro Usenet back in, I think, in 1997 to 2001. It was a lot of fun. I was out there explaining what the Zetas were saying, and they were saying, "Oh, you idiot," you know, and we went. But I said, "Listen, the moon should not be up where it is. It's too big. It's moving too slowly. That's not centrifugal force. Centrifugal force is where you have a rock on a string and you swing around and around and around, you know, and as long as you keep moving at a certain rate, that rock is elevated off the ground at the end of the string out there, right?" But our moon, you know, goes around every 28 days, and it's pokey, you know. And so I said, all these, the inverse square gravity is further away, the less gravity pull it has, and also the centrifugal force math. And I'm not real good in math, you know. But I said, let's take out mass and substitute. You know, let's say, because the moon is mostly gravity, I mean granite, the weight of granite. Let's substitute that for this thing called mass, which is nebulous, because the weight of granite is a real thing. Okay, we did that. And I had a couple of mathematicians that jumped in, you know, to take over, because I was trying to do this on my own, and they said, "Oh boy, where to start?" You know, so they did it, and they took it over, and they plugged in the weight of granite into the inverse square and also centrifugal force math theorems, and it turned out that as you bring the moon down toward Earth, about 6 inches off the surface of the Earth, it would be moving as slow as a Concorde jet. Now, can you imagine the moon, the mass of the moon, at 6 inches above the surface of the Earth, moving as slowly as a Concorde jet? It wouldn't. It would crash into the Earth. It shouldn't be up there. That's a fact. You know, and as soon as we arrived at that, they blustered off, red-faced, and refused to talk anymore. And that's what happens with mankind. It's flat Earth. You know, I still get people saying, you know, the Earth is hollow and the Earth is flat, and what are you talking about? And you know, and people don't want to let go of their pet theorems. Man is not smart enough to understand that. So there's a repulsion force in the gravity, which is a particle flow. And the Zeta said, what we are used to experiencing is when the particles are drifting down toward the center of the Earth, which is a gravity sink, right? Down and down. So, of course, you fall out of the tree, you thud to the ground and break your leg, right? So what's keeping all that gravity particles from accumulating down there? Well, there's a reverse. As it gets too crowded, because particles are attracted to each other, and if they get too crowded, they want to burst apart. So it bursts out in a laser-like and cuts right through our physicality, our atoms and subatomic particles out, you know, like a fire hose. So we got the fire hose from the middle of Earth and a fire hose from the middle of the moon pointing at each other and preventing these two big gravity sinks from coming closer to each other. There are places on Earth where this fire hose of gravity particles is happening to such an extent that it forces a movement into another dimension. One of those is the Bermuda Triangle, where planes like, you know, Flight 19, where do they go, right? And boats people have said the boat's at the end of this rope and whoops, it disappeared and now it reappeared, that kind of thing.
You know, it's also...
It went into the next dimension because the gravity is coming out so fast. Yeah?
It went into the next dimension?
Yeah, that those planes went into the next dimension. Remember in Close Encounters of the Third Kind where they discover those airplanes and the deserts of Mexico aged and that kind of thing, nothing aged. And, you know, they were trying to relay that.
Now,
they're in fourth density.
Okay, and wasn't that movie filmed a lot of it was filmed at Devil's Tower, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I want to ask you a question about that. I've got a Geiger counter built into my watch. I've got a really nice MTM. It's a military grade, and I've taken this thing with me all over the country, and I keep track of the radiation levels. Like right now, we're at .11 microsieverts per hour, which is higher than normal, but lower than it's been recently, if that makes sense. But when I was out in Devil's Tower and outside of the park, the levels were extremely low, lower than I've ever seen them. And then when I got to the tower itself, I actually walked up to Devil's Tower. It was at 0.60, which was more than 12 times what it was outside of the park, which I thought was quite fascinating because that's actually kind of high. What would that be caused by?
So, and what is it that you were reading? There was the point.
The radiation levels were much higher at the actual tower. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because at first I was just thinking, okay, this is probably just a natural, maybe the radon, or there's certain stuff coming out of the soil, et cetera, that's causing the radiation levels to be really high. Maybe this is volcanic ash or something that's causing this. But then I brought it up to my mom, and she's not a conspiracy theorist at all. She's extremely down to earth. I said, hey, I went to Devil's Tower. I noticed that the radiation levels were 12 times what they normally are outside of the park. And she goes, well, isn't there radiation left over a lot of times when there's UFOs that land or UFO cases that talk about radiation? I thought to myself, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, there are. But what I'm getting from the Zetas, and this is not official Zeta talk. I just, they suggest, that whole Devil's Tower thing is like a volcanic.
Right.
There was a volcanic core of a volcano, and everything else kind of blew and washed away. But the core stuff that came up, you have a lot of those spires in Africa too, are from when long time ago when volcanoes were, and the last thing to go is that center core. And that's also where Yellowstone as a supervolcano is nearby. Devil's Tower, I think, is in Wyoming. And
Wyoming.
Yeah, and Yellowstone
close to South Dakota.
In that same area. And of course, what the Zetas have said about Yellowstone is a supervolcano, because people say, oh, it'll go blow and we'll just be wiped out. They said, no, it's going to be a normal volcano during the crustal shift, the coming pole shift, because of all the baffling that went on from the Pacific pushing under the West Coast, the Sierras and the Rockies, etc., and creating, mountain building that creates baffling in the rock layers, so that when the magma comes up toward Yellowstone as a volcano, it has to go back and forth, and it never quite makes it, so it won't blow. It slows, it impedes the speed and volume. So, but way back when Yellowstone was a supervolcano, because the Earth was received a big blow away in its very, very early days. It was not in its current orbit. It was out further. It got smashed in its side, which is why we have the Pacific is so deep and is so big water-wise, and all the land seems to be grouped on the other side in Pangea. So because of that wound, that there was a lot of stuff that went on that's never going to repeat now due to the passage of time. But back when it was a supervolcano, very deep magma came up into Devil's Tower, and it was of a consistency that you do not find in your normal volcanoes today. That are pulling from more of a surface magma. Not that deep, and that's why you have that high radiation. It came from a source that was deep within the Earth, and not because of frequency of UFOs flying around.
Not the giant mothership that was in the.
No. They, you and I can go in and out of motherships, and I know I do. You probably do too, and we're not being affected by radiation. No.
Wow, I you know what? If I had an opportunity to jump on a Millennium Falcon and go out for a cruise, I would certainly want to remember that. I got life flighted to the hospital once. I don't remember that experience. Dang it.
And going to end up on Earth in the future. You will be a hybrid.
Now, the hybrids, do they have the same lifespan of about 400 years also?
Yeah. Yes. Right. Yeah, that was one of the requisites. In other words, they were given like a work order from the Council of Worlds.
Okay.
But they had to achieve, and they did.
And they live on the craft and just travel the stars, essentially, or?
Yeah, they can. The hybrids are fourth density like the Zetas and like all these other creatures that come from elsewhere. But yeah, they're living in fourth density. They're living in high-tech dome cities, hither and non, probably even on Earth, but we in another dimension, so we don't see them. But after the pole shift, when there's a lot of chaos, they'll just appear in our dimension and help survivors.
Wow, that's fascinating. Reminds me of something out of like an H.G. Wells book or something. When the pole shift happens, how long is it going to take, and where's the safest place to be? What should those expect and be prepared for?
Well, the Zetas have been real specific. They can't give a date. They know the date, but they can't give it. And the reason is, and even the Bible says, none shall know the date of my return. Jesus says that because it would be used for wrong purposes. It would be used by the bad guys to enslave man, to kill off those they consider too rebellious or they call unwanted eaters. For purposes of enslavement and control. So the date would be used for bad purposes. But sequence of events the Zetas have given, and they've given that as in several different formats. One is the last weeks, which run from 7.3 weeks long, which include 3 days of darkness and the Earth slowing to a rotation stop, and the pole shift itself takes an hour, and then rapidly that's the end of it, and the size of the earthquakes and all that. So leading into the last weeks, which were nowhere near, the Zetas were asked back in 2008, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the pole shift and 9 being the last weeks, where are we? At that time, they said we're 2 or 3, and so periodically they've been asked, where are we? Okay, and now finally, when we got to that weird woman who gave a holographic presentation, she was presenting plate movements that would happen in the 7 of 10, which we are in the midst of. 7 of 10 is the Sunda plate, that basically holds Indonesia sinking about 80 feet. And which it has, and South America rolling to the west, creating, which it's in the process of doing, Africa rolling to the east, which it's in the process of doing, and then a big New Madrid rip in the North American continent, so you can see we're only partway through the 7 of 10. So we have a ways to go. The 8 of 10 is supposed to be more visibility of Nibiru, which we already have, and sociological changes, riots, rebellions, the Brexit in the UK, race wars in the US, that kind of thing.
Okay, so, there's a lot of things that you do see right now that it's kind of touching on, but as far as a full-on pole shift, that's hopefully a long way away. Now, it's just going to be within hours, so, is that going to throw people in the air? Is it going to be, do you need to, hold on, be strapped into a seatbelt, essentially? If you're on a boat, are you going to flip over? Do you need to be in a submarine? You need to be hang gliding?
Yeah. Some of that is true. It's going to be Richter 9 everywhere. Actually, the Zetas described it as Richter 15 because Richter, or magnitude, includes scope, but basically it's magnitude 9 everywhere, which, of course, throws buildings on their side and rips things up, breaks bridges, tosses your car. And the Zetas said, and people say, well, we need a bunker. No, you don't. They said the very best thing you can do is dig a trench about 2 feet deep, 2 feet wide, and lay in it. And if you can, pull a piece of sod over you or a board or, something like that, but just out of the wind, if you just lay down, they tell you that about tornadoes. Get out and lay down in the trench at the side of the road, and the tornado will go over you, and you won't get hit by flying debris either. And trees are very well rooted. They don't really fall over because of earthquakes. Hurricane force winds will be everywhere because you're going to have a 90-degree crustal shift. The Zeta said the bulge of Brazil will move up to where the North Pole is, and the middle of India will become the new South Pole, and the Pacific shortens, the Atlantic rips open, and consequently you'll have hurricane force winds because the atmosphere doesn't want to move, and so you can even compute where your winds are going to come from. And here in Wisconsin, I have computed that it's going to come from the northwest. All right, that means board up your windows. And actually, if you secure your house to the basement, the foundation, because most houses are not bolted to the foundation, do that. It's not complicated. You get a couple 2x4s and make a T and bolt it. And anyway, you'll more likely have your house upright, maybe a few broken windows. Okay, so then that takes place within an hour, and so and then it's like when a speeding car is going to hit a bridge abutment, and they have all those barrels of sand, and the sand absorbs the impact, and the barrels do, and you go boom, 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 and the car you're not dead because you've hit the barrels one after another and slowed your pace. Well, it's with the pole shift, it's the same sort of theory. It's not the movement during that hour when the crust is sliding and you see the moon and the stars sliding across the sky. It's the stop, the sudden stop at the end that is the problem. And that's where you get the boom, the Richter 9 jolt. So don't be in a house. Don't be underground, because underground bunkers will fall on you. Everything, rock layers will collapse and shift, and, don't be up in the air because the hurricane force winds will rip you away. If you're out to sea, your big danger here is that your compass won't work afterwards. Things magnetically are going to be all screwed up for quite some time. You won't know where you are. You'll be out to sea, and you won't know should you go north, south, east, west. Whoops, you can wander around out there and run out of food and die. So they say that's not such a good solution either. Is that helpful?
Absolutely, yeah. I really appreciate you bringing that to our attention. And have they told you anything about the elections this year?
Well, actually, the Zetas have a phrase called "hands of man," and they have stated, and this is all public ZetaTalk, so I'll repeat it, but that General Dunford, we're in a type of martial law right now, but it's not publicly announced. And since last September, Obama has not really been in charge of the U.S. government, but everybody wants to pretend that he is because it's less of a shock to the people. And how did that come about? Well, in the summer of 2012, Obama decided that because he had to tell the public, the people, that Nibiru was present and is approaching us, it's going to make a passage, and nothing we can do to stop it, that kind of thing, and they deserve to know. And we followed that closely, because he had all kinds of, if you think people are trying to stop discussions about Nibiru and the like, Rex, the idea of, remember when he was down in South Africa and there was somebody, a translator standing next to him, and it turned out this poor man was a schizophrenic with violent tendencies, and somebody had messed with his meds, and he was really struggling with himself, and then they couldn't even figure out how that guy got on the stage with Obama. And another one during that time, he went to Israel, and somebody put diesel in his petrol car.
In the Beast?
Supposed to be,
Their,
yeah, and
their
it was
carrier?
assassination attempts right and left. So the bottom line is he had tremendous blocks, and people, if he tried to make a emergency broadcast announcement, the wires would get cut and nothing would go, and so basically, finally we arrive into the summer of 2015, 3 years later. And Jade Helm was called, and and everybody was very suspicious because it was a massive enterprise exercise, all across Texas and through to California and all over the place. It was, people were even talking about military vehicles up in Montana. They said this is part of Jade Helm. So what they were doing is getting ready for Obama to make the announcement. Ronald Reagan set an executive order saying don't talk about Nibiru and don't talk about aliens, and I have reversed that, and I am here to tell you, Nibiru has arrived, it's in the inner solar system, here's NASA to explain it, and then we were going to have riots and all that kind of stuff, and everybody was going to be ready. Well, what the Zetas said, matter-of-factly, it didn't happen by September 15th, and Jade Helm closed because, quote, Obama lacked courage, quote. And he chickened out at the last minute. He was all set up. So when Dunford saw that, and then there was a mess in the Middle East too, with ISIS. I mean, we had alliances with Saudi Arabia, for going back forever, and Turkey, which is a mischief maker, because we had a base in there, and Israel because of all the banks, and they were all party to helping foment ISIS, really. Turkey was brokering their oil and taking care of their sick, and Saudi Arabia is a Sunni, just like ISIS is a Sunni, and they didn't like Iran, who is Shia, and and Obama just couldn't sort that out. He was all tangled up in old treaties and the like, and Putin wanted to go in there, and General Dunford said, okay, that's it, I'm taking over, and Putin, you have at it. And the U.S. stepped back, and instead of, sending weapons to Assad rebels who were part of ISIS, Putin worked with Iran, the Kurds, who are terrific at fighting ISIS, and Assad's army is, and we're in there bombing, but we're not in charge. And we have people say, oh, we should be leading. Well, our leadership was forget that. So Dunford had to step in and straighten that out because we were having hordes of migrants pour into Europe, and many of them ISIS fighters, and coming over. It's still a problem, it's a mess. So anyway, and now ISIS is being pushed back like crazy. They've lost all kinds of, one by one the cities are being taken back from, and it's because of Russia, which is terrific. Terrific job, good people. Anyway, so I lost the question about why I wandered off. I wandered into a swamp, Rex. Help
me out. It was good. I was
enjoying
enjoying it. I was actually just, I was just like, wow, this is great. So you were talking, essentially we were getting into the Nibiru cover-ups from the Reagan administration, and then we got into the Jade Helm. So
yeah.
With that said, there was a Jade Helm 2 even. There was UWEX is what they called it, and they had a lot of people speculate there's some AI interface involved with that. Is there any artificial intelligence connected with the Jade Helm exercises, or is that just internet psychobabble?
I actually am not familiar with that, but I would have to say artificial intelligence has been around forever. Robots are very popular these days, and a lot of talk about that. The Zetas have said essentially that you will never have robots that rise to the level of like a human creature with a consciousness and a soul. Robots do not have souls, despite what the movies might tell you. And what you love BB-8 and R2-D2 and 3PO and all that, but they don't have souls, because at base they are programmed. No matter how far you go back, they are operating off of programming, but humans and other creatures that are conscious and have consciousness, which is a prerequisite for sparking a soul, can make their own decisions. They can make their own programming, and therefore robots do not have souls. Anyway, visibility of Nibiru has gotten so real. That you can see it. There's a webcam in Italy, another one in France every day, just about because the skies are clear. They have these wispy little clouds. They don't interfere. And there it is, a pink orb with these shoulder pads on either side. And then there was a cam in Alaska recently that came to my attention, and I thought, oh boy, look at this, another site. Who would think Alaska? Why is this? And it turns out that it was an image taken at midnight because a cam in Sedgwick, I think, Alaska, where they have cams for pilots, weather cams, and it was looking almost directly north, azimuth 344, where north is 360, over the North Pole to where the sun is over Europe. And you're not supposed to be able to see the sun at that point because the Earth is wobbling under the influence of Nibiru. It goes every day, a figure eight. So because it was pushed north, it could see the sun for 2 hours, from midnight to 2 in the morning. There was the sun, and then it went back down, and then, of course, come 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, here's the sun again rising. But during that 2 hours at midnight, you could see Nibiru, to the right-hand side with the shoulder pads. Antarctica cams have captured it at times. People can see it, if they use filters. Welder's lens, if it isn't a real heavy welder's lens, to block out all light. During eclipses, you usually have such a sun glare guard that you can't see stars, you can't see anything. So they're filtering out Nibiru in eclipse photos or streaming eclipse stuff. But you can see it if you use Mylar, which screens out all light spectrum except very heavy preponderance of red light spectrum is allowed in, or the filter in the middle of a floppy disk, which also allows red light spectrum to dominate.
Okay. And I don't know if you answered this or not when you were talking about it, we kind of lost track a little bit there, but do you think that there will be elections this year then because of martial law? Or
Right. I knew there was a question we dropped. All right. Now we have Dunford in charge. He does not like Hillary Clinton because she is criminal, and but he could get along with just about anybody else, as he is with Obama, saying, "Look, I know you got elected, but I'm running things," but not Hillary because she lies all the time, and so there's a chance that the 2016 elections may be halted. Now, this could happen under the guise of several different things. She's got all kinds of health problems. And all this about vibrant, good health, come on. All this coughing fits. The Zetas say she's actually dealing with heart failure because that causes the lungs to fill up with fluid, which makes that coughing. The fatigue, the bloating, the edema when she looks 9 months pregnant now and then, all this, and heart failure because she's constantly angry and has been constantly angry almost all her life. Very ambitious, and it's not always getting her way, and then she fumes. But she also has multiple sclerosis with offensive lenses, which showed up periodically, and so many photos of her wearing this. And just recently there was one in New York City, and there she is with and those lenses are to adjust the double vision, which is one of the first signs of multiple sclerosis, and also makes you lose your balance, fall over, conk your head, so all of this stuff about she was underhydrated and fell over and fainted or whatever it wasn't at all what happened. She's got all kinds of health problems. She has to take blood thinners, or she's prone to stroke. So she could say, I have health problems and I have to drop out of the race. She could say, because of all the turmoil and I'm losing in the polls to Donald Trump, which she certainly is now, the real polls, like Rasmussen and Quinnipiac, they include cell phone users in their polling, whereas these others do not. They just robocall landlines, which are all the old people, that are
right.
supporters. So the real polls, like Rasmussen and Quinnipiac, they show Trump now about 5, jumping up to 10 points above her, in swing states too. It's like he's running away with it. But it would have to be where it's, if she would drop out, and they're trying to pressure her to do that, and Biden stepped in, or even Bernie, Dunford could get along with either of those. Those are and Trump too, reasonable people that he could talk to. But Hillary is not a reasonable person. She's, I don't even know. I don't need to describe her because anyone listening already has their own opinion. But I don't have a high regard. You can't. You could say, "Are you going to do X, Y, and Z?" And she'd say yes, and then she'd do the opposite because she lies all the time.
Don't most politicians though?
Well, some are worse than others. There are some good politicians, and you have to wonder about the profession. Really, you have to wonder about the profession. How many people say, "Well, I'm going to become a politician because I've got to do good for the world." They don't do that. They're going into that because they want power, and control, and those are not good signs.
So how do we change that? How do we get people to have positions of power to create balance and harmony and help others, not hurt others for their own gain?
We become a service to other society. The Zetas have described, this spiritual split, in which our early schoolhouse learning here, we're required to go through all these lifetimes, and we're in the playpen either bashing each other or sharing our cookie or whatever, until we finally sort out, by our actions, and we are firmly in the good-hearted, practice the golden rule, help others, even if I have to sacrifice my well-being to do so, and versus the selfish, sadistic, greedy, I got to be in charge 5%, and the good-hearted are 95%. Okay, so if you have a grouping of this 95%, eventually arriving at spiritual maturity, right? Well, it's like heaven. There's no need for money. You just sort out who needs what and who needs help, and you're always volunteering. You notice that somebody is struggling, you say, "Wait a minute, I can help you with that." That kind of thing, and everybody shares everything, and everybody's helping, and you get to choose what you want to do. And people generally shore in behind you and help you with your chosen, now obviously if everybody wants to be a pilot and there's not enough planes to go around, then people say, well, look, we're starving to death here because we're all trying to fly the plane. I'll go grow apples or something, because if you're good-hearted, you're looking at the general welfare and making your decisions accordingly. According to the Zetas in their societies, they don't use money. People ask me, well, should I invest in gold? And my statement is the Zetas say you don't need money at all. Read, and I point them to that particular ZetaTalk article where they talk about, living without money, how they do it and the specifics. Because I got into an argument early on in a debate with a guy saying you have to have money, about how they do it without. they're constantly in tune to everything else around them, and they're making adjustments in their schedule or what they've dedicated themselves to, depending on where the needs are. And so does that sound a little bit like communism? The Zetas have said there's nothing wrong with communism except human nature. What went wrong there was human nature, because instead of really sharing, we got people who were greedy and started to hoard and try to get one-upsmanship, more power.
Well, and when you live in a society that you have just the education system the way that it is, the entertainment industry the way that it is, the monetary system the way that it is, I mean, it would certainly be a different paradigm to think, how could we survive without money? But obviously, it's happened before and it's going to happen again. Money is just a means of exchange, and there's always a form of exchange. Money can make things easy, but it just depends on what level of consciousness you're at. If you're in 4D or 5D, I mean, does this physical matter, if that makes sense? So that's incredible to think about. Now, what would you say, before we close out tonight, Nancy, the most current data you have on Planet X and Nibiru and Earth changes? And before we go there, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on, because you were just a mountain of knowledge, and I'm getting gems of goodness and information all over, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, because I remember that was one question, and I wandered off and never did really get it to answer, but you said, where do you look for it now? Back when it was coming in the night sky, the right angle and declination, raw and dic, sufficed, was the best way to measure. But right now, being pushed back into the August position and tilted back and forth to simulate our seasons, we're looking at the sun, and in the northern hemisphere, it seems to be at the 4 o'clock position to the sun. Not real close. It is a little bit away. You can tell if you look at the photos, and I sent some of those to you, Rex, of second sunrise and the like. They show that there is a distance, an arm's length away, that where you'll see Nibiru itself. But the moon swirls tend to, point toward us, curl under the sun, and then around and above the sun. So there's all this trashy tail stuff and moon swirls that go around the sun and in between the Earth and the sun. But Nibiru itself is at the 4 o'clock position. Now, you go down to Brazil or southern hemisphere where they stand on their head. Their little feet are glued to the globe and they're standing upside down. They see Nibiru at 11 o'clock, a 10 to 11 o'clock position to the sun. So when you see photos from the southern hemisphere, you have to bear that in mind. And of course, in between, around the equator, depending, so it's not a hard and fast rule. You have to compute where you might be looking. Nibiru itself is less visible than some of these moon swirls. The moon swirls are like long tubes, where the moons are in a dance with each other, swirling around and around, the repulsion force keeping them from bashing into each other. When the sunlight beams down along this tube, it's like a flashlight. It bounces around in there, comes out the end, very bright, intensified, and focused. And when people see bright orbs around the sun, that's not Nibiru. That's the tube end of a moon swirl, and they can be very bright. People have pulled over at the side of the road and said, oh my gosh, and taken photos because they see this. Nibiru itself is more like a dim fuzzball. But lately, as I said, in the webcam in Alaska and Italy, etc., its visibility is astonishing. It's like a pink orb with the shoulder pads. So there's the different sightings are the second sunrise and sunset, where it's off to the side, depending on if you're in northern or southern hemisphere. Also the moon swirls. Also the webcam, pink dot. And of course you can get this with your own phone or your own telescope and the like. Use the filters like Mylar or the red filter inside of a floppy disk, and so the visibility is only going to get stronger. And we are going to be told the truth because we're in the process. Planet 9 was out there 20 Sun-Pluto distances in the direction that infrared team looked. The Zeta said at that time, 20 years ago, they said 18.75 Sun-Pluto distances is our sun's dark binary, and Nibiru passes back and forth in a sling orbit between that dark binary and our sun. So Planet 9, they were talking about what is this? Well, they were really talking about the dark binary of the sun, which is the gravity sink out there. But now then they started talking about all kinds of exoplanets and this and that, and closer in. And now everybody's looking, and now we're dredging up the Dark Energy Survey and taking a look at their charts from the past few years to see what might be going on, because we think it might be closer, that the Hubble and the Kepler and the WISE star mapping, they look way out, but they're missing what's right under our feet, because ESO in Chile has found exoplanets closer in that we missed. Well, I think by the end of summer, we're going to be getting pretty close to where they're saying, oh, look what we found next to the sun over there. You know that fuzzy stuff, that fuzzy orb that people have been saying they've been seeing it? And now it looks like we have an exoplanet, right? It was so covered in red dust, we just didn't see it.
Sounds like they found Planet X in the background right now. I heard some
siren
going
off.
off.
There. Yeah, they're just getting around to slowly telling people how they missed it when it was right there.
Well, I got to bring up that article that came out just a short while ago about how those two people from Caltech, some astronomers from Caltech, came out with an article that said they found a body of some sort, some mass in between Jupiter and Saturn. But they didn't really say what it was, if it's Nibiru, Planet X, Wormwood, or whatever. So this is Wormwood, Planet X, is Planet X, Nibiru, are they all one in and of the same?
Yeah, and different cultures. The destroyer, Wormwood, Marduk, Planet X, different terms. And the ancient Sumerians called it Nibiru, which is therefore probably the proper name for it. Different. In the Bible, it says the Lord will come in the sky, thundering in clouds. Well, and they're talking about Nibiru. Book of Revelations is all about the return of Nibiru and the red dust, running blood. So what you're hearing during this slow revelation, or explanation, I should say, the establishment is trying to explain to the public how come we have an exoplanet that snuck into the solar system and is moving slowly past the sun. It's got the Earth like a deer in its headlights, and it's approaching, and they didn't notice it. They're trying to say because Kepler, WISE, and the Hubble looked too far out, because it's shrouded with red dust. And they're doing this by saying, oh, look over here. Oh, wait, what about that? Oh, yeah. And everybody's jumping in, and, it's a team effort and popping up with different studies and sorting through old data. And they're trying to look like they're bumbling their way, but they know. They know it's there, and they know what they're... But, they just can't... There's two ways of doing it, to come out and say, we've been lying to you all these years. And another way is to say, oh, my gosh, we just... And they're choosing the latter, the oh, my gosh approach instead.
I would recommend our listeners go to ZetaTalk.com. You've got all sorts of articles on here, ZetaTalk archives. You've got a great YouTube channel. Check out ZetaTalk on YouTube as well. There's many podcasts. And thanks for everything, Nancy. Keep up the amazing work, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to speak with you again soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rex.
Thank you so much. And folks, also check out leakproject.com. If you subscribe to YouTube, you'll have access to the latest podcasts absolutely free. And if you become a contributing member on Leak Project, you'll have access to exclusive content. Thanks for everything, you guys. Have a wonderful day and be the change you want to see. This is Rex Baird. Talk to you soon. Hey everybody, this is Rex Baird with Leak Project. It's July 16th, 2016. I hope you're having an amazing day wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Now this is part 2 of the Nancy Leider presentation. Nancy's from ZetaTalk.com. There are thousands of archives on that website predicting different outcomes and scenarios. Now Nancy's been talking about Planet X for over 10 years. And with the amount of information that's been presented during this podcast, I would say this is definitely one of the more compelling presentations that I've been involved in to learn data from other sources about Nibiru. One of the really interesting things about this interview, guys, is we were actually disconnected on the internet. Then we were disconnected on a landline twice. Several times when Nancy would bring up specific points of reference, the call would either drop or the sound wouldn't be there. Is it Skype gremlins? Is it just the phone system? Was it a solar flare? I don't know. But it was very interesting because I actually, after we got disconnected the first time doing the video presentation, I wasn't able to log back onto my internet hotspot. I had to actually use a different hotspot, a completely different Wi-Fi setup to get back on to the interview, and we had to finish it with her on a landline. If you go to leakproject.com and become a contributing member, you'll have access to all of our podcasts ad-free. A lot of people like to listen to shows when they're on a road trip or at work, and sometimes they don't have Wi-Fi access. So if you'd like to download all the shows, you can actually just listen to them on your phone, on your computer, at work, in the car. So you can do a daily opportunity. Actually, what it is it's set up to where it's downloadable per podcast, or you can do a weekly podcast download where you can download as many podcasts as you want for a week, and then we have a monthly option as well. So it's pretty cool. Check it out, leakproject.com. If you don't mind the commercials, just go to youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord. If you subscribe with YouTube, you'll have access to the latest podcasts absolutely free. There is going to be an exclusive section, though, on leakproject.com that is only available for members. Enjoy the presentation. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget, be the change you want to see.
You?
It is, and I actually had to hook up my hotspot from my cell phone because I can't get my computer to hook back up to my router now.
Are we recording?
Yeah. So
all right, we're good.
Yeah, we're good to go. I don't know what's going on, but somebody either didn't want us to talk or the Skype gremlins got us. One of the two.
You know, there's a lot of electromagnetic pulse these days, and that's caused by Planet X. These planes going down. If you were recording, I'll rattle in ammo. But the whole thing about MH370, that was, you know, the whole plane became a ghost plane because the electronics were fried. German wings flying into the Alps, that MS-804 Egyptian plane going down into the Mediterranean. There's EMP like crazy. And over the U.S., we have a lot of that. You can see the graphs on the small planes right over the whole New Madrid region and up the East Coast. Yeah, just frantic. The first week of June, there were so many planes you couldn't even see the landmass under the chart. So, and it causes static on the radio stations. It causes electronics to falter. It makes people a little nauseous and dizzy. But you know, here we are in the middle of the mid-morning, and that's when Nibiru is right above us. It's a little bit. It precedes the sun a little bit along the ecliptic, and so it's casting its nasty electromagnetic pulse at us.
Well, I'll tell you that, and now it wouldn't even let me hook my laptop back up to my router, which was kind of weird. So that made me wonder if there might be something even more to that, because this is some pretty sensitive data. But hey, who knows? Maybe I'm just looking into it too much. But you know, you gave us about 20 minutes of invaluable information, Nancy. And when I went back to look at that recording, it was just so staticky from whatever reason. I don't know. So could we go back? Could we jump back to where we first started talking about you and how you had your first experiences with the Zetas, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. And I knew the Zetas from prior lives because reincarnation does exist. And I've been told by the Zetas I have like about 1,200 lifetimes. So they knew me. They knew my soul. And I said during this time, which is the time of the next passage of Nibiru, when we would have a lot of cataclysmic changes on Earth, a lot of spiritual growth, a lot of change, that I wanted to be a communicator. And they, knowing me, agreed to back me in that. And it turned out to be much more successful than they expected. So ZetaTalk is considered a success. I was about 7 or 8 years old, running around. I was tomboy, my little coveralls, barefoot, down in my swamp below my grandmother's house, catching frogs, and out they popped from behind trees. You know, when you, as a child, if you see wildlife or something, you go off of the vibes that you're getting.
Right.
Out my joints. They looked at my forehead, and later on I realized what they were doing because my son also had an implant put in where his third eye is, in the chakra. As far as I know, he and I are the only two contactees that have ever had an implant put there, and it was for communications with the Zetas. So then off I went. But when I did recall of that later, when I was 55 years of age and I became aware of my contactee status, and I was meditating and just telling the story, I remembered in that first visit that they did something behind my elbow on my right arm. And I walked up to a mirror, backed up, and took a look, and there's a nip there like a mouse bit me. So they took a soil sample from that spot. And it goes to show that this is not your imagination. When you feel the pain on recall, and it's something that you weren't even aware of, that you now suddenly discover, some weird scar. Who looks behind their elbow? What parent looks behind the child's elbow? You know, and I didn't even know I had that little scar there. So that's how I got introduced to the Zetas in this lifetime.
Now, what are they from the Zeta Reticuli area? Is that why you call them Zetas?
Actually, this is from Benny and Barney Hill. Oh, you know that famous episode.
Oh yeah.
And she drew a map, and there was some woman in Minnesota who said, "Oh, that's a star chart of Zeta Reticuli, all the stars," and that's how they got to be called the Zetas. They don't have a name for themselves because they are so highly telepathic. They don't require names. I'm not sure how that quite works, but the bottom line is they don't run around with names and numbers. We do. In order to be able to find individuals, I have to know what your name is, what your telephone number is. In their case, they just sort of put their finger to their head and said, "Rex, let's you and I talk," and boom, there we are. You know, well, they don't say Rex. I mean, I don't know how they work that, but they don't use names. It's not their name for themselves. And they said that their stars are not the bright stars we're aware of. They're dim stars. The reason their eyes are so huge is because, like our night-seeing creatures, they need big eyes to pull in all the light. So they were on planets around dim stars, and just like man, early man was genetically engineered from the ape. They were transplants on those planets, and they have what they called early Zeta. They had me draw an image of what they were giving me, kind of a lobby head in the back and squat. Looked a little bit like E.T. actually. And they said that they had a diet of moss and bugs on their dimly lit planets. So they didn't have large predators. They're not really meat eaters. They're really vegetarians. They eat bugs. And they do look. I'm not sure about anybody else's photos, but when they came out, or when MJ12 released the Skinny Bob video, 17 seconds of an old tape that had been taken during Roswell days, and they showed this adorable Zeta, you know, with a wrinkly forehead and winking his eyes and adjusting his little shirt. Boy, that's what they look like. And I went back and compared the images that I had drawn of what the Zetas look like. Their hands, they have long fingers. When you shake hands with them, their fingers end up landing in the middle of your forearm. They have very high cheekbones, a little nose that's so tiny that I equate it to like your little finger, vertical up and down. It doesn't stick out at all. Mouth that's just nothing more than a little line, a slit, you know. And they do have ears, but they don't stick out. So Skinny Bob is absolutely a small Zeta, and it matches the drawings that I had drawn since ZetaTalk began in 1995.
They also look like Lamb, which was drawn by Aleister Crowley back in the early 1900s, or maybe mid-1900s actually, where he made contact with this entity called Lamb, and it had very similar eyes, very similar shaped head. So that's interesting. I often wonder if where they come from, like the way that they get in and out of dimensions so fast, some of these ETs, are they going into the same space that maybe spirits are too?
Well, this is the way the Zetas have described it, and they say they can't give us a better description of that because they don't know either. There's like an evolution of spirituality. We're on the lower level, kindergarten, and they're the next level up, and it goes up and up, so until finally you don't need incarnations anymore, and you just live in light form. So in any case, they said there's a density shifting that goes on, and when you're very young, the physicality is heavier than the spiritual stuff, and they call it the stuff of souls, which transcends all these densities. In other words, you can be speaking to someone who's in the fourth dimension or fifth, sixth. Your souls can have a conversation because they're in touch with each other, but the physicality is different. What does that mean? That means that our atoms and our physicality, the atoms and subatomic particles and all that, vibrate at a certain rate. And if you go to the next dimension, the vibration increases. It's faster. So therefore, something in the third dimension or the fourth dimension can occupy the same physical location, and these atoms will not interact. This is why you can see a spaceship and boop, it disappears. Where'd it go? This is why over the Devil's Triangle we have like Flight 19, and those airplanes just disappeared. They went into the fourth dimension. Now, the Zetas describe that as a density. Density and dimension are the same thing. It's a vibrational frequency. So yes, the stuff of souls transcends the physical nature, and all souls on all different levels can speak to each other.
That's fascinating. And if we could go back also, you were giving us some great information on Planet X and Nibiru, kind of the origins all the way back in '83 when it was first discovered by some scientists. Could you share that story with us again?
Yeah, basically, the ancient astronomers have always known that there was some kind of a gravity tug, out in the direction of Orion that caused perturbations in the outer planets. And the ancient Sumerians knew about Nibiru that came in from that direction and made a passage every 3,600 years. Well, actually, the geological signature on Earth is unmistakable. You know, there's things that happen every 3,600 years. So you go back, and it's the Jewish Exodus, you know, when that big volcano in the Mediterranean island of Santorini blew, and it was huge. And we have the story of, the Red Sea parting, Moses, and all the red dust, you know, turning the lake blood red, and the plagues, the insects and frogs jumping around. And well, that was 3,600 years ago. And there's all kinds of geological records of that. Extinction caves, they found one